Lieutenant Grace Viper Thompson stood at the weapons station in the elite SEAL training facility at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, methodically cleaning her M4A1 carbine while 30 male operatives watched with barely concealed amusement. At 27 years old, she was the first woman to make it through preliminary SEAL weapons training, though Master Chief Ryan Hammer Blackwood made it clear every day that he considered her presence a dangerous experiment. His voice boomed across the range as he announced to the crowded training facility that women couldn't handle SEAL-grade weaponry, citing too much recoil and too much responsibility. The men chuckled at his remarks, but none of them knew that in exactly 72 hours they would be deployed to extract American hostages from enemy territory, and she would be the only one qualified to get them out alive. Blackwood's voice carried across the facility as he called Thompson to center stage, suggesting she show whether she could handle real SEAL equipment instead of playing with training toys. Grace set down her rifle and walked to the center of the facility where Blackwood had arranged a weapons demonstration that was clearly designed to humiliate her in front of the entire training class. He gestured toward a table loaded with advanced SEAL weaponry, announcing to the gentlemen observers that they had the Mk-18 CQBR, the SCAR battle rifle, the M249 SAW, and the Barrett M82A1 sniper system, describing these as real weapons for real warriors. He looked directly at Grace with a condescending smile and told her to pick her poison and show them what women can do with actual firepower. The trainees formed a semicircle around the weapons table, some pulling out phones to record what they expected to be an embarrassing failure. Grace approached the table without hesitation and selected the Barrett M82A1, the heaviest and most powerful weapon available. Blackwood laughed, pointing out that the .50 caliber weapon weighed 30 pounds and had enough recoil to dislocate her shoulder, questioning whether she was sure about this choice. Grace didn't respond but simply carried the massive sniper rifle to the firing line, set it up with mechanical precision, and prepared to engage targets at 800 meters. Blackwood called out the requirement for target acquisition, demanding 5 shots at 5 different targets and warning that missing one would result in her removal from the program. What happened next silenced the entire base. Grace's first shot hit the center of target 1 with devastating precision, her second shot eliminated target 2, and her third, fourth, and fifth shots followed in rapid succession, each one finding its mark with surgical accuracy. But she wasn't finished, and without permission, she transitioned to the SCAR-H battle rifle and engaged moving targets at 400 meters, then the Mk-18 for close quarters combat simulation, and finally the M249 SAW for suppressive fire patterns. Every shot was perfect, every transition was flawless, and every weapon was handled like she had been born to use it. The training facility fell dead silent except for the sound of brass casings hitting the concrete floor. Blackwood finally spoke, his voice tight with barely controlled anger as he dismissed her performance as a lucky day, insisting that real combat was different because paper targets don't shoot back. But before he could continue his dismissal, alarms began screaming across the naval base and red alert lights flooded the training facility as Commander Patricia Hayes burst through the door, her face grim with urgency. She shouted over the sirens for all qualified personnel to report for immediate deployment, announcing that they had American hostages in hostile territory and that this was not a drill. The mockery died instantly as 31 operatives snapped to attention while Hayes continued her briefing with deadly seriousness. She announced that 12 hours ago, a Marine reconnaissance team was captured during a classified operation in enemy territory, activating a tactical display that showed 6 Marines, including team leader Captain Rodriguez, being held in a fortified compound 20 miles behind enemy lines. The display showed satellite imagery of a heavily defended position surrounded by hostile forces, and intelligence indicated the hostages would be executed in 18 hours unless they extracted them immediately. Hayes continued by explaining this was a volunteer mission only with a survival probability of less than 40%, yet every hand in the room went up. She detailed that equipment loadout included everything they just trained with, including SCAR-H rifles, Mk-18 carbines, Barrett sniper systems, and M249 support weapons, warning that anyone who couldn't handle these systems under combat stress should not volunteer. Master Chief Blackwood stepped forward to protest that Thompson wasn't qualified for combat operations since she was still in training, but Hayes checked her tablet and noted that according to her scores, Thompson just achieved perfect qualification on every weapon system they were deploying. She stated that Thompson wasn't just qualified but was the highest scoring operative they had, and the room went silent as every male trainee processed what they had just heard. Hayes commanded them to gear up as helicopters would leave in 30 minutes, instructing them to bring everyone home. 28 minutes later, 4 UH-60 Blackhawk helicopters lifted off from Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, carrying 31 SEAL operatives toward the most dangerous rescue mission of their careers, with Grace Thompson sitting in the lead aircraft, her Barrett M82A1 across her knees, surrounded by male operatives who were no longer laughing. The flight to the insertion point took 2 hours over hostile territory, and through her night vision goggles, Grace could see the enemy compound in the distance, a fortified structure surrounded by guard towers, razor wire, and heavily armed patrols. The mission briefing came over their headsets, stating that the primary objective was hostage extraction, the secondary objective was intelligence gathering, and rules of engagement were weapons-free with orders to eliminate all hostile contacts. The helicopters descended toward the landing zone, a small clearing 3 miles from the target compound, and as they approached, enemy muzzle flashes erupted from the tree line. The pilot called out that they were taking fire as bullets struck the helicopter's armor, and Grace was the first one out of the aircraft, her SCAR-H battle rifle already firing as she hit the ground, her shots finding their targets with mechanical precision and eliminating enemy positions that the other operatives couldn't even see in the darkness. Someone called out about a sniper in the North Tower, but Grace had already identified the threat, dropping to one knee and transitioning to her Barrett M82A1 to eliminate the sniper with a single shot at 600 meters. One of the trainees whispered in amazement about how she even saw him, while Master Chief Blackwood commanded the team to move out and assign Thompson to rear security. But Grace had already identified a better tactical position, and while the main force approached from the south, she circled north using terrain features to get within 200 meters of the enemy compound undetected. From her position, she could see the entire tactical situation developing, with the hostages being held in a central building surrounded by guards who were now responding to the approaching SEAL team, but there were problems the main force couldn't see. Through her scope, Grace could identify individual enemy fighters moving through the compound with practiced efficiency, counting 42 hostiles armed with Alaska 47S, RPGs, and at least 3 heavy machine gun positions that would devastate the approaching SEAL team. She called over the radio to inform Blackwood that he had 12 hostiles moving to flank his position from the east, reporting an additional machine gun nest at a specific grid reference and requesting clearance to engage because she could eliminate them. Blackwood gave a negative response, ordering her to maintain her position, and Grace watched through her scope as enemy fighters prepared an ambush that would kill half her team while she had clear shots at all critical targets, but orders were orders. She could see the enemy commander coordinating the ambush through hand signals, positioning his fighters with military precision that suggested extensive combat experience. That was when everything went wrong, as the SEAL team walked into the ambush exactly as Grace had predicted, with automatic weapons fire erupting from concealed positions and pinning down the American operatives behind inadequate cover. The sound of battle echoed across the compound as muzzle flashes lit up the darkness, and Blackwood's desperate radio call came through requesting immediate support and reporting 3 wounded with heavy casualties. Grace didn't wait for authorization but opened fire with her Barrett M82A1, eliminating enemy positions with devastating precision, her first shot taking out the machine gun nest that was causing the most damage and silencing the weapon that had wounded 3 SEALs, while her second shot eliminated the sniper who had the team leader pinned down. But 12 hostiles were too many targets for one sniper, even one as skilled as Grace, so she transitioned to her SCAR-H and began moving toward the compound using suppressive fire to allow the pinned-down SEAL team to reposition, her shots so accurate that enemy fighters began retreating rather than face her advancing fire. Blackwood called over the radio asking for her position, and Grace replied that she was at the north wall of the compound even as she eliminated 2 more enemy fighters who were trying to flank the SEAL team, recommending immediate assault while they were disorganized. Blackwood gave a negative response, ordering her to wait for backup, but Grace could see something through her scope that made waiting impossible, as enemy fighters were moving toward the hostage building with weapons drawn, their body language indicating they had received orders to execute the prisoners, meaning the Marines were about to be killed rather than rescued. She made the decision that would define her career as Grace Thompson, armed with weapons that women couldn't handle, stormed the enemy compound alone. She breached the north wall using explosive charges and then moved through the compound with surgical precision, her Mk-18 carbine eliminating guards with close quarters accuracy that defied human limitations, with every shot calculated, every movement purposeful, and every target eliminated before they could raise an alarm. The compound's interior was a maze of corridors and rooms, but Grace navigated it like she had studied the blueprints for years, moving with the silence of a ghost and the lethality of a predator while eliminating sentries and guards without alerting the main force. She reached the hostage building as enemy fighters were entering with execution orders, and through the windows, she could see 6 American Marines bound and blindfolded, surrounded by armed captives who were preparing to carry out their final orders. Her breaching charge blew the door open just as the first Marine was about to be killed, and what happened next became legend in SEAL training courses. Grace eliminated 6 enemy combatants in the hostage room without hitting a single American Marine, her shots so precise and perfectly placed that she cleared the entire room in less than 10 seconds, with each shot being a masterpiece of marksmanship under extreme pressure. She called out to the captured Marines that this was US Navy and they were safe, and Captain Rodriguez, the team leader, looked up in amazement through his blindfold as Grace cut his restraints and asked who the hell she was. Grace replied that she was Lieutenant Thompson from US Navy SEALs, handing him a sidearm and telling him they were here to bring them home, and Rodriguez couldn't hide his surprise as she freed the other Marines, noting that they sent a woman. Grace corrected him by saying they sent the right person while checking the tactical situation outside the building and asking if he could move. Rodriguez confirmed that all 6 Marines were mobile while helping his wounded teammates prepare for extraction, but warned they were surrounded by at least 40 hostiles who knew exactly where they were now. Grace checked her ammunition and realized she had burned through most of her supplies reaching the hostages. The SEAL team was still pinned down outside the compound, and extraction seemed mathematically impossible. One of the Marines said quietly that there was something she should know, explaining that they didn't just stumble into capture but were betrayed because someone fed their position to the enemy. Grace's blood ran cold at the realization that if there was a traitor in the operation, their extraction helicopters could be flying into a trap. She keyed her radio to inform all call signs that this was Viper with a possible compromise on extraction, recommending alternate exfiltration, but static was her only response. Rodriguez said grimly that they were jamming their communications and they were completely cut off from support, and Grace looked around the compound through the window, calculating odds and options with mathematical precision. She assessed that 42 enemy combatants remained active. They had 7 Americans total with limited ammunition and no communication with extraction, and enemy forces were regrouping for final assault, meaning the mission parameters had just become impossible by every tactical standard, but impossible had never stopped her before. Grace announced her plan with professional calm, explaining that she was going to clear them a path to the north wall, and when she gave the signal, they should move fast and not look back, continuing toward the extraction point no matter what they heard. Rodriguez responded with respect that she couldn't take on 42 hostiles alone because that wasn't tactics but suicide, and Grace smiled grimly, her eyes already calculating firing positions and target priorities, noting that Master Chief Blackwood said women can't handle SEAL weapons and suggesting they prove him wrong in the most spectacular way possible. She positioned herself at a window overlooking the compound's main courtyard where enemy fighters were organizing for a final assault on the hostage building, her Barrett M82A1 having 8 rounds remaining, which meant 8 shots for 42 targets, requiring her to make every bullet count and use psychology as much as marksmanship. Grace's first shot eliminated the enemy commander, throwing their organization into complete chaos, while her second shot took out their communication specialist, cutting off their ability to coordinate effectively, and her third and fourth shots eliminated key squad leaders who were trying to restore order. With half her ammunition gone, she transitioned to psychological warfare, her fifth shot eliminating a fighter who was rallying the others and creating panic in the ranks, while her sixth shot took out someone trying to flank their position, making the enemy believe they were surrounded. With 2 rounds left and 38 enemies remaining, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, which was the distinctive rotors of incoming UH-60 Blackhawk helicopters, as the extraction team had broken through the jamming and was approaching for pickup, but enemy fighters were moving toward the landing zone with rocket-propelled grenades ready to shoot down the rescue aircraft. Grace used her 7th shot to eliminate the RPG operator just as he was aiming at the lead helicopter, and her 8th and final shot took out the fighter carrying spare rockets, preventing any follow-up attacks on their ride home. She called to the Marines to move as she led them toward the north wall while the SEAL team finally breached the southern defenses with explosive force, and the compound erupted in chaos as American forces converged on the extraction point from multiple directions. Grace and the 6 rescued Marines reached the helicopters just as Master Chief Blackwood and his team secured the perimeter with overwhelming firepower, and Blackwood called over the rotor noise, his voice carrying respect instead of skepticism, asking for her status. Grace reported with professional calm that they had 6 Marines extracted with 0 casualties and mission accomplished, and as the helicopters lifted off from hostile territory carrying all American personnel safely home, Blackwood looked at Grace with an expression she had never seen from him before. He said quietly that it was some of the finest shooting he'd ever witnessed in 30 years of military service, asking how many rounds she fired total, and Grace replied 47. When he asked how many targets she eliminated, she answered 47, representing perfect accuracy under impossible conditions using weapons she supposedly couldn't handle. Back at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, the mission debriefing revealed the full scope of what Grace had accomplished using weapons that women supposedly couldn't handle, as she had eliminated more enemy combatants than the rest of the SEAL team combined while ensuring 0 American casualties during the most dangerous rescue mission of the year. Commander Hayes announced to the assembled training class that Lieutenant Thompson's performance represented a new standard for SEAL operations, her voice filled with professional admiration as she described how her tactical decisions, weapons handling, and combat effectiveness saved 6 American lives and completed the mission under impossible circumstances. Master Chief Blackwood stood up slowly, his demeanor completely transformed from the man who had mocked her 3 days earlier, telling Thompson that he owed her an apology not just for today but for every day he questioned whether women belong in SEAL operations. He looked around the room at the male trainees who had laughed at her, stating that she didn't just prove she can handle their weapons but proved she can use them better than any of them, and the training facility that had been filled with mockery and laughter 3 days earlier was now completely silent with respect and awe. Grace Thompson had silenced the entire base not with words or arguments but with the most devastating response possible, which was perfect performance when American lives depended on it. Blackwood continued by announcing that from this day forward, Lieutenant Thompson would be leading advanced weapons training for this facility, explaining that if they wanted to learn how to handle SEAL-grade weaponry, they would learn from the best operator they had. Grace stood up and addressed the room for the first time since the mission began, saying quietly but with absolute authority that weapons don't care about gender because they respond to skill, training, and dedication, and if you master those 3 things, the weapons will never fail you. Captain Rodriguez, the Marine she had rescued, stepped forward with obvious emotion to thank her personally, explaining that his team and he were alive because she refused to accept limitations that other people tried to place on her. But Grace's response was characteristic of her personality and professional ethos as she said she was just doing her job because that's what SEALs do, which is bring people home no matter the odds. 3 years later, Lieutenant Grace Thompson had been promoted to Lieutenant Commander and was leading the most elite SEAL weapons training program in military history, her methods having been adopted by Special Operations Forces in 12 different countries, and her combat record remained perfect through 18 separate missions. The training facility where she had once been mocked now featured a bronze statue in the main lobby depicting a female operative surrounded by the weapons she had mastered, with an inscription that read that excellence knows no gender, only results. But more than the awards and recognition, Grace had fundamentally changed how the military viewed female operators in special operations roles, her perfect performance having opened doors that had been locked for decades and proving that capability transcended gender in the most definitive way possible. 6 months later, the SEAL training facility at Coronado had been completely transformed under Grace's leadership as she was now the lead instructor for advanced weapon systems, and her training methods were being adopted by Special Operations Forces worldwide. Her perfect mission record had continued through 12 more combat deployments, each one adding to her growing legend, and the range where she had once been mocked now bore a bronze plaque stating that excellence has no gender, only results. The woman who couldn't handle SEAL weapons had become the most decorated female operative in Navy history and the most respected weapons instructor in the special operations community, but more importantly, she had proven that skill transcends stereotypes, that competence conquers prejudice, and that sometimes the person you underestimate is the one who saves your life when everything goes wrong. Master Chief Blackwood, now retired, kept a photo on his desk from that first weapons demonstration showing Grace Thompson surrounded by every weapons system in the SEAL arsenal, all of which she had mastered to perfection, and underneath the photo, in his own handwriting, were 5 words stating that she silenced the entire base. The weapons didn't care that she was a woman because they only cared that she was the best operator who had ever used them, and that was exactly what Grace Thompson had proven beyond any doubt. The woman they said couldn't handle SEAL weapons had become the standard by which all other SEAL operators were measured, her response to their skepticism having been not words or arguments but perfect shots, successful missions, and American lives saved. Sometimes the most powerful response is the one that needs no explanation, only results, and Grace, Viper, Thompson had provided both in abundance, silencing doubters and saving lives with weapons they claimed she couldn't handle, and the base stayed silent out of respect rather than skepticism. which made all the difference in military history.